Hello and welcome to Critical Line Item. My name's Tom Ravlic. Thank you for joining me for this particular podcast, my second Sunday morning reflection, where I look at different things that I've reported on or experiences I've had, and hopefully you'll be able to get something out of it, or you might talk to somebody else who may learn something from what I say to you in this podcast. One of the things that happened to me years ago that caused me to open my eyes more was an incident that I had when I was a part of a folk dancing troupe in one of the in the Croatian community in Australia, in Melbourne, and it was a simple little thing um, where I had a couple of uh, young um, members of the ensemble come up to me. They were the sons of a friend actually, and they asked me what my hearing aid was. Their father turned around and sort of didn't want them to make me feel uncomfortable, so he moved a step forward. I told him it was okay. I took my hearing aid out, showed them the battery, explained them what it was. There was no reason to fear the device, and they went away. They ran off. They ran off happily. They'd learned something. It was their curiosity had been satiated, and off they went. And I spoke to the father afterwards. I said, "Don't um, do that. Um, let them learn. Let people explain what the issues are because they learn more from it." And that's an incident that causes me to reflect on two things that we typically have problems with in our society. Let me talk about the area I'm an expert in first: accounting, audit, corporate governance. So, in the case of corporate governance and corporate disclosure, that example, that little modern sort of lesson, if you like, can be woven into the corporate environment. Companies can be very risk averse. They can talk to lawyers a lot. They can do all sorts of stuff. Um, but ultimately, what a company really should be doing is looking at the way in which the corporate talks to, in a civil and clear, plain English manner, its stakeholders, its owners, its workers, creditors, suppliers, financial analysts, stockbrokers, the media, journalists, government regulators, the Australian Taxation Office, all of that and more. If you're disclosing things clearly and you demonstrate that you have nothing to hide, you're more likely to be taken seriously, in my view, and your statements are more likely to be given credibility. But if you fail to communicate properly, the way some companies have failed to communicate in certain issues to do with corporate governance and the hiring of people who've had contentious contentious things happen in their past, um, companies will struggle because people out in the community will rightfully question whether or not they've got something to hide. If they're transparent and they tell stories more readily, then that becomes um, a tick against their name rather than a cross. It becomes something that the community turns to and turns and looks at and says, yeah, we understand where they're coming from. They're being transparent. And that's kind of what people need to think about. Yes, it's important for lawyers and others to get involved in terms of risk mitigation. That's all very good. And I'll never argue against risk mitigation or having a proper risk framework in place for a company or an accounting firm or any sort of entity. It's important. But what's equally important is making sure that you have a conversation with the marketplace in plain English, right? So you don't alienate the people out there that are actually keen to talk to you, keen to listen to you, keen to invest in you, keen to buy your products. If you pull the shutters down, if you shut the doors, if you're communicating in gobbledygook rather than plain English, of course you're going to put people off. Of course you're going to alienate people. Of course you're going to create a situation where you aren't taken seriously by the community because of the fact that you haven't communicated clearly. Let's look at another scenario where this kind of thing is relevant. Remember, I said that I took the hearing aid off and I showed two members of the ensemble who were relatively young how it worked, or how big the battery was, and how it helped me, and the fact that there was no reason to fear the disability and a device that's used to hear properly. Look at what we do when it comes to issues of race and religion and disability and ageism, sexism, gender, and whatever have you in the community. We have debates that illustrate quite clearly that we have an incapacity to have a sensible conversation amongst ourselves. What we need to be doing is taking the lesson of transparency and openness and being open to a difference of opinion and being open to a communication about religion, understanding um, different beliefs, different belief systems. It is incredible when I look at um, some of the reading uh, I've done over the years on Christianity and in Islam and in Judaism and in Buddhism and other kinds of faith systems or belief systems. And the minute you start reading more deeply in all of these things, you begin to piece together the similarities of values. Okay, the similarities of certain values. Yes, there are very conservative traditions um, that need to be modernized in Christianity, in Judaism, and in Islam. That's certainly the case. But unless people understand and have grounds for comparative analysis, um, prejudice will continue in society. It's the same with race matters and traditions, cultural traditions. They don't need to be religious, they can be something else. People in one part of the world do X on Christmas Day or do X on a particular holiday, while people in another part of the world will celebrate something different, X and Y. Understanding that means we understand each other better. Explaining things clearly and with a degree of transparency helps. It may break down the walls, may break down prejudice. We need to be prepared to learn. That's the thing. We need to be open to learn. Children are open to learn. People going through school are open to learn. But there's a point where sometimes people just sit in a rut and they refuse to learn because learning implies effort. But that effort is the only thing that will get you to understanding. And that effort is what I argue leads to people being less prejudiced and being more understanding and more tolerant as individuals. That's where we need to be. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Stay safe, look after each other, and I'll have another Sunday morning reflection for you in a week's time. Take care.